Saygıdeğer misafirler, tekrar hoş geldiniz.
Distinguished guests, I would like to welcome you again. The third session in current reflections of the events of 1915 and the perspective for the future now starts. Our moderator is the retired ambassador Alev Kılıç. Our speakers are Professor Ömer Turan, Professor Yıldız Deveci Bozkuş, Ergün Kırklıkovalı, Dr. Christian Johannes Henry, and Patrick Walsh. Now I'd like to leave the floor to Ambassador, retired Ambassador Alev Kılıç. Yes, please. Thank you very much. I would like to start by thanking the Presidency's Directorate of Communications for organizing this important, necessary, and timely conference. And I also would like to thank all the participants and panelists for their valuable contributions. Today has been a long day, it's been a tiring day, and this is the third session. And in the first two sessions, the events of 1915 and the Armenian allegations were discussed from a historical and legal perspective. And we listened very important presentations on these topics. And regarding these Armenian allegations, we feel strong about the historical and legal aspects of them. We know this, and in this session we will be talking about the political aspect of this matter, and this political pillar is not based on a rational foundation, but just serves an arbitrary approach. As you know, in 1991, Armenia declares its independence for the second time after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And looking at the Armenian approach, we can say that there is an interesting point here. Because at the very same time, Armenia and also Georgia declared their independence, and we know that Armenia increased this figure and said that it is the third time because they considered the republic in the Soviet period as an independent state. And this is just an additional point, but it's an important one. In this period, when we shifted from bipolarity to multipolarity, Turkey has adopted a consistent approach and defended for regional cooperation. And in 1999, under the umbrella of the OSCE, 6 countries started a cooperation under the name of Caucasus Cooperation, and after the Georgian War in 2008, there was the Caucasus Stability and Cooperation Pact that included 6 countries, and after the Karabakh War, as we know very closely, that in 2021, Turkey also defended that we should have a 6-country platform, a platform including 6 countries. And on the other hand, Armenia is actually, through the pressures or suppressions of the church or other elements, is following policy that was full of hatred and expansionist policy as well. And because of this wrong policy, Armenia had come to such a point that led to defeat in the Karabakh War. In 2018,
ve eski zihniyeti tasfiye hedefine güden Paşinyan yönetimi
Pashinyan administration took the office and they defended the Velvet Revolution and they understood the mistakes of the past, but still, with the influence of the pro-regime supporters, they understood a policy that should be based on the regional relations and friendship, and yet they hesitated about what to do in this respect, and we still see that this hesitation is ongoing. And on November 9, there was an armistice, and on January 11, there was an agreement to implement this armistice, and there were some promises made for regional cooperation. On the other hand, there was France and the European Union and the United States. There were some aspirations, old aspirations, leading up to the day, and these are the aspirations of the West, we know that. And today, we have very valuable panelists, and I believe that they will shed light on these topics. We will start with the first speaker, Professor Ömer Turan.
2013-2020 yılları arasında Orta Doğu Teknik Üniversitesi
He was actually head of the Department of History at the Middle East Technical University between 2013 and 2020, and we had the chance to work together closely, and I believe that many of you do not know about this, but the Middle East Technical University is one of the exceptional universities in the field of history, and they have Armenian issue in their curriculum, and Professor Ömer Turan is especially interested in this topic, and I would like to congratulate him for his new post. He is now the rector of the Matthew Northern Cyprus University. His biography is quite lengthy, and because of the time limitation we have, I will not be able to read it through. And now I would like to leave the floor to Professor Ömer Turan, please. Distinguished Ambassador, distinguished moderator, and distinguished participants, I would like to thank you for your praises. And the lesson is still ongoing, thanks to you. And we know that you are the successor of very significant work. I also would like to thank Presidency's Directorate of Communications for organizing such an important meeting. And my topic is the missionary aspect of the Armenian issue, and I will make my presentation on this topic. The missionary activities, the Christian missionary activities, began as the activities to extend the religion. But it's like the iceberg. There is the economic aspect and cultural aspect and military aspect behind it. So briefly, I can tell you that the countries that sent their missionaries, they try to open an area of life for themselves in the places they sent their missionaries. And within the context of Anatolia and the Middle East, we know that it becomes more and more sensitive in this respect because in the Christian literature it is called the Bible-led. It was considered the land where the Christianity was born and the first churches were established. But these lands are now under the control of the Muslims, and the Crusades were not enough to take those lands back, and the missionaries actually conducted an unarmed crusade to take these lands back. And there were the British Protestant missionaries that came with the capitulations, and in the second half of the 19th century, there were German missionaries that came to Anatolia, to the Ottoman lands. In 1820, the first two U.S. missionaries came to the Ottoman lands, and in 1830 and 31, two missionaries, Smith and Johannes, went from Izmir to Balıkesir, Istanbul, Tokat, Sivas, Erzurum, Van, Trabzon, Yerevan, and all the areas that the Armenians lived, and they had a 1.5 year long travel. Although they were not together during their travels, they penned different reports, and then they brought their reports and notes together, and they tried to draw a general picture of who the Armenians are and what they were doing and their relations with the Ottoman state and their cultural and social status, and etc. So they wrote a very long report, and using the data in this report, the U.S. missionaries started to work among Armenians. The first station was established in Istanbul, the second one was established in 1835 in Trabzon, and then in Erzurum. At the beginning, the Western Asia was the first name of this mission, and then it was later called the Turkish Mission, and they considered Anatolia as a whole, but they called it as if it was the northern Armenia and southern Armenia. This is the name they gave it, and after 1863 they renamed it in 3 stations: the southern, middle, central, and northern Turkey. And before the First World War in 1912, 174 missionaries were working in the Anatolia, and the number of people they converted to Protestant was just about 1,000. And the conversion of religion is just the iceberg, top of the iceberg of the missionary activities. There are many other points behind it, but in addition to these religious activities, they were active in the field of press and education and healthcare, and their activities in Anatolia were mostly addressing to the Armenians, and in the Balkans they were addressing to the Bulgarians. And up to 1881, they had 725 publications, and almost half of them, 358 of them, were for the Armenians. They were written in Armenian. And in 1913, before the First World War, only in that year, the number of pages they published was more than 6 million. So with these publications, they tried to appeal to the Armenian people, Armenian youngsters. And the second pillar is in the field of education. As you know, in 426 schools, they trained more than 125,000 students, and there were different schools among them, including the Robert College and other colleges and schools, and they raised children at these schools with the nationalistic feelings, and they imposed liberal ideas of the West to those children, and they actually reminded those children of their Christian identities, Armenian identities, and the children who had such an education actually became the pioneers of the Armenian cultural awakening. And they would later become the leaders of different committees in this respect. And of course, the third pillar is the health, and at around 20 hospitals and dispensaries, more than 40,000 people were treated, and some of those people were treated for several times, and the missionaries always created a relationship where they were strong and their correspondents were weak. And the missionaries were always sympathetic to the Armenian separatist movement. And at the beginning, I said that they called it an unarmed crusade. They were sympathetic to the Armenian movement, and they actually protected them from the Ottoman Empire, and because they had the capitulations at the time, and they actually told the events that happened in Anatolia in a very different way, in a very distorted way to the West. We know that they also had problems with the US diplomats. Tehran is one of them, because in 1894 and 95, it was the embassy in Istanbul, and he had a fight he had an argument with the Armenians and said that you are threatening the Ottoman-Armenian relations with those exaggerations. But they were strong, they were powerful, and they attempted to remove him from the office, and they actually gave him a very hard time. There were also some other U.S. diplomats. One of them was Admiral Bristol. I will come to that as well. When we see the First World War on the horizon, the missionaries understood that their time was up, their time was there, it was their time, and they said in their publications that the non-Muslims should not be left to the administration of the Ottoman state, and they even said that even the Muslims should not be left to the Ottoman administrators, and they made some publications on this thesis, on this argument, and they tried to lay a foundation for the occupation of Anatolia. And after the Armenian relocation started, through the aid agency they had, they actually made some reports and news against the Ottoman state and tried to allegate that the Armenians were going through a hard time under the rule of the Ottoman state, and the Wellington House was their supporter. They worked with it, and they actually used the Wellington House's publications against the Ottoman state. As you know, after the First World War, then came the War of Independence, Turkish War of Independence, and the missionaries continued their activities. For instance, in Kars, on October 30, 1920, Kars was recaptured by the Turks, and around 30 Armenians died during this. And the member of the relief, I said that 80,000 Armenians were killed. And Admiral Bristol was the High Commissioner in Istanbul and knew that there was no such thing. And in his diaries, he said that this was just an exaggeration, it was an allegation far from the realities, and discussed it with the news agency, and they apologized, but they still continued their activities.
3 tane misyoner vardır. Amerikan
There are 3 missionaries in the Lausanne delegation, Martin and Pete, and also the principal of the Robert College Gate, and also there was Montgomery, another missionary who was working in favor of the Armenians and conducted some propagandas, and they all were sent to Lausanne. These missionaries sincerely tried to adopt a decision in favor of the Armenians and also influenced the US delegation, and they conducted such activities for their purposes. They had another goal, and this was to make sure that the missionary agencies exist in the new state, and once they achieved it, as they did in the other intended states, they left back to US and forgetting about the Armenian issue. The most important dimension of the missionary activities is that in 1915 there were the events that occurred, but all this actually laid the foundation for these events, because the representatives of the intended states were not there because they were in war, and there were Germans, and both the US missionaries and German missionaries, they conducted their activities on this land, and that was the mentality they had, and all together they were making up false news, fake news, and also they did their best to protect the Armenians and tried to create a perception against the Turks in the Western public opinion. They tried to create a perception in the Western public opinion against the Turks, against the Ottoman state, and the reason behind this is the missionaries, because there were their propaganda activities, and there was the Blue Book, and they actually provided the sense of the Blue Book, and there were the reports of the U.S. missionaries as well. It's very important to know about this, and of course, the image of missionaries is different in the Western world, because they are considered as goodwill people, as objective people. And when this perspective was revealed to them, they actually learned something new, and I believe that all these records and registries should be evaluated from this perspective. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Teşekkür ederim.
Thank you, Professor Ömer Turan.
İzlediğim bir konu.
This was a very interesting presentation, and I would like to say that
Veya görmezlik
Professor Turan has mentioned about the top of the iceberg, especially the religious aspect of this iceberg. It's a very important point. Thank you very much for your contribution.
bundan sonraki konuşmacımız
The next speaker is Professor Yıldız Deveci Bozkuş.
Yıldız Hanım'ı göremiyorum.
I cannot see Yıldız Hanım. Are you here?
Sayın Deveci Bozkuş.
Are you here Yıldız Hanım?
Ben ekranda göremiyorum. Beni
I cannot.
Gerçi sesinizi alabiliyorum. Benim sesimi
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yani ekranda göremediğim için kusura bakmayın.
yok ekran.
I could not see you in the screen. That's why I asked. Professor Yıldız Deveci Bozkuş. She's a very familiar academic face for us. And first and foremost, I would like to recall her to our audience. And in very recent time, she became a professor. And I would like to congratulate her once again. And it's a very recent time. And now she is working in the Ankara University. Miss Bozkuş is working on the history and international relations, literature, and Caucasus. The crimes against humanity, genocide, in those subjects she is trained, she is educated. Terrorism, Turkish-Armenian relations, diaspora, and the Karabakh problem, and the parliament decisions. About those matters, she has very many national and international projects, and she wrote articles about those subjects. And meanwhile, what is interesting here is that she worked in the United States of America and in the University of California, Los Angeles in UCLA, and she worked on Armenian question and parliamentary decisions. She worked on those subjects, and actually she was in the beehive, to say, and she's very valuable experience. And Miss Bozkuş, the title of her presentation is "It's Time to Solve the Armenian Question." Thank you very much. Distinguished audience, I would like to extend my best regards to all of you. I prepared a presentation. I share my screen, but I'm not sure if you can see it. Yes, we can. About Armenian question, the time to solve the Armenian question. Why? So, because for centuries this problem is ongoing and we could not find any solution. First of all, let's look at how Turkish-Armenian relations started. Maybe it's better to look from this perspective. As you all know, relations started in the Selçuklu period. But when you look at the relations between two societies, especially, we cannot go beyond 1915 for both parties. And for Ottoman Empire, as you all know, the Armenians, the bankers, they were working as craftsmen, and they were working in the administration, and this is important, and they have privileged position. And within non-Muslim society, they were dominant, and together with the 19th century, this position went on. And with the Ottoman Empire, of course, they contributed a lot to the state administration. You know, they had 29 pashas, 22 ministers, 33 members of the parliament, 7 ambassadors, and 11 consul generals. And between Balkan Wars, between 1920 and 1930, there was a Minister of Foreign Affairs, and there was an Armenian minister responsible from the Ministry of Treasury. And as in the morning, it was actually it was asked what is the position of the Committee of Union and Progress. And in the Chamber of Deputies, there were some members of the parliament nominated by the Committee of Union and Progress. And there were members, Armenian members in the Committee of Union and Progress. And Oskan Mardikyan was personally appointed as the Minister of Postal Affairs by the Committee of Union and Progress. In the bureaucracy, Ottoman bureaucracy, Armenians played a key role because there was no racist rhetoric against Armenia. There were questions in the morning. So was there any hatred towards Armenia? No, there was no such situation. Artin Dadyan Pasha worked as the undersecretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In the Ottoman bureaucracy, they worked as bureaucrats. And in the Privy Council, when you look at the members of the Privy Council, you see the Armenian names. And they have, for example, in the powder mills, in the mines, and in the Amira class, there is a significant contribution. And of course, the state entrusted the most important and strategic institution, the control of the institution, which is very important. And of course, Turkish and Armenian society, they affected from each other, and including their homes, the Armenians were speaking Turkish. And in the 19th centuries, we know that Turkish newspapers and books were published with Armenian letters, and very many works were translated actually from Armenia, by Armenian intellectuals into Turkish. And this, we know that the architect of some mosques were Armenians, and they contributed a lot. Another important point, as you can see in the screen, there is a newspaper, Varakaya Havadis. It's a Turkish newspaper written in Armenian letters. When you check the numbers, when you check those newspapers, there was no discontent of Armenian community, Armenian society. I talk about 1960s, and in this immediate circle of the Abdülhamid II, there was Johannes Pasha. He worked there, and in 19th century, Armenians, including the Privy Council, the interpretation, the translation room, and in the Ministry of Private Treasury and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they worked in those institutions. For example, Mustafa Reşit Pasha, Rıza Pasha, and Fuat Pasha, they worked actually, and they worked as interpreters, they worked as ambassadors. But then what happened, and this picture is changed. There are very many aspects, there are very many factors. Of course, since the morning, our professors have been talking about it. But to sum up, at the beginning of 19th century and the 20th century, the nationalistic movement was very influential. First Greeks, and then the Serbians, Wallachians, Moldovans, they separated from the empires, and it was an example for Armenians. But in 1877, 1878, until the Ottoman-Russian War, the Armenians were loyal to the Ottoman, and there were some breaking points going towards 1915 events. But if you go back, especially Professor Yusuf talked about the Berlin Convention. And with 1774, there was a treaty, and Vienna Congress in 1815. In Vienna Congress, the Eastern question came to the front, and this process started to be disrupted. And of course, the Ottoman-Russian War was a turning point for Ottoman Empire, and the Armenians, for example, were separated to different groups among each other. So as a result of all those developments, during the First World War, the Ottoman Empire had to issue the Relocation and the Resettlement Law. So what is the content of the Relocation and Resettlement Law? We talked about a very positive picture, but this positive picture turned to a negative one. And in the First World War, together with the participation of the Germany and Austria-Hungary, then the Armenian nationalistic considered it as a huge opportunity. And if the Ottoman Empire joins the World War, they said, the Tashnak people said they would support the Ottoman Empire as a loyal society. But there was a secret committee organized in 1914, and they said the approaching war would be used as an opportunity to gain their independence. So that was such an understanding, that was such an idea. So then what happened? They started to guide the Russian armies, and they established gangs, and they attacked Turkish people, and they were insurgent activities. But there is a very important thing here. The Anatolia and rather than the Ottoman Armenians, Professor Said also mentioned it, there were Armenians brought from different regions, and they played a significant role in those things. And then what happened? The Armenians were subject to the relocation and resettlement, and then we look at the foreign literature, the deportation, the word deportation is used, but what you mean by deportation? To send them out of the borders. But it's not the case for Ottoman, because they were sent to another place within the borders of the Ottoman Empire. Of course, there were some problems. The people, lost their lives. Turkish people lost their lives. Different ethnic people, the ethnic groups lost their lives because of the weather conditions, because of the epidemics. Because of the pandemic, we are organizing this event online. So 100 years ago, think about the effects of the outbreaks, and there were problems in employing the police officers and the gendarmerie, and there were insurgencies from the other groups. So it's time to keep aside all those things. Despite all these sufferings and tragedy, the Turkish-Armenian relations did not start in 1915. That's why it should not be finished on 1915. That's why we need to save our relations from the shadow of 1915. Otherwise, we cannot reach anywhere else, and upcoming generations should not be raised accordingly. In the Dardanelles, in the First World War, and in different regions, we were defending these territories all together. So we can continue this attitude also today. There was a tolerance, a climate of tolerance in the Ottoman Empire. We can sustain this tolerance environment, but we need to take some steps. Of course, the Armenian, from the Armenian side, there was a study, I was also included, to see how they refer to Turkish people, and the problem started with the Eastern question. The Armenian problem started with the Eastern question. So actually, there was no hatred towards Armenian in the Ottoman Empire. So it was also included in that study, and the biggest proof is the historical textbooks. But when you look at the Armenian textbooks, now you see the problem. The major powers, the grand powers, use them as a tool. So, but when you look at the textbooks, the French people are also blamed because they let the Armenians, they let them down, and the Russian, the Russians were regarded as, regarded as people who saved the Armenians. And, for example, there was a quote: "The Russia helped the Turkish people in the War of Independence, and then they let down the Armenians." There was such a quote in the textbook, and there was there was a treaty between the Ottoman Empire and the Russian War, and since Russia helped Turkish people, there was a blame for Russia. And in the Armenian history textbook, there is a strong image of Turkey and Russia, but Armenia was a victim. There was such an image in those textbooks. That's why for Armenia there is no single enemy. That's what is said in the textbook. And everyone who conquered and who was a conqueror was an enemy. For example, Iranian people, Romans, Arabs, and the Byzantines and the Turkish people, they are all enemies of the Armenian. But the Turks come to the forefront for Armenian. But for solution, what can we do? And every year we issue the condolence message on the 24th of April each year. So, up until today, Turkey is extending a helping hand for Armenia. But let's keep aside all those allegations this year. But another way can be tried. Maybe it's time to solve this problem. And the relations between two societies, of course, should not be limited to the events of 1915. They are deeply rooted. Maybe the other side is also aware of it. During the First World War, not only the Armenians but the Muslims also lost. They have losses. Maybe the other party will be understanding it. And how many people killed? 1.5 million, 600,000 people. It doesn't make sense to talk about those numbers. Johannes Tumanya, there is such a writer, Armenian writer Johannes Tumanya, and he says, let's debate to find enlightening ideas to bring the fraternity, the brotherhood to the societies. I think it's time to do it right now, because for both sides, for the ancient people of the region, it is the unique solution, because Tumanian was underlining that the fraternity of the nations and the happiness of the people depends on the cohabitation of those people in peace. And of course, the regional and the global powers, they have some desires in that geography, and they do not want to have a climate of peace, tranquility, and stability. And with the normalization, there will be a transformation in the region, because at the foundation of the problem, there is the Eastern question. That's why the Armenian society should do what they should do, and the Western societies, the Armenian people should understand that the West used 1915 events as a tool. And Hrant Dink says the addressee of the question should sit together and should really talk about the peace. And let's open a new page, he said, because for a prosperous future, necessary steps should be taken. And Turkey, up until now, we started some initiatives. For example, in 2001, Turkish-American Reconciliation Commissions, and the platform, they joined historian commissions. Several steps were made, but there was no single response. But it should be changed right now. 24th of April, there was the parliamentary decisions were issued, and it was my PhD study. And when I started my PhD, it was 16 countries, but now it's 40, 50. It's increasing each year. For example, 49 states in the United States accepted those decisions. So we are talking, and the Armenian people are talking now, what kind of a message will be released by Biden. And of course, these allegations, these claims are also destroying Armenian society. So why Israel accept it, and why don't they accept it? And they were, for example, when you look at from this perspective, the word for genocide is not used, but the Great Massacre, for example, expression is used. So it's also wrong to say that. And about these parliamentary decisions, I think they are used as a political tool, and everyone is aware of it. And everyone should take its own responsibility. And these decisions are important for both countries, political, economic relations, and of course there are some decisions taken by international societies. And of course, for the normalization of normalization of the relations is very essential, and for the parliamentary decisions, they have legal and political impacts. And the professor, our distinguished professors, shared their insights with us. But they have political implications. They have negative implications on the relations of the both sides. So Armenian people should undertake the responsibility. But because 1915 events, it's not only Turkey and Armenia, but Western people, actually Western states should take responsibility. And we, for example, we previously said that the problem started with the Eastern question, and the 1915 events should not be used as a tool for a domestic political tool. And 1915 events should not be used as a trump card for Turkey. And the problem should be resolved by peaceful means. And the domination of Armenian diaspora on Armenia should be ended. And you know, in June there will be elections, and then I think they should take this into consideration in the elections. To sum up, you know, in the most remote corners of the world, when you go those places, as mentioned by my professor, the most radical people in the diaspora, you see the most problematic people are there. For example, you see the statues are there and the columns are there, so you see them everywhere. And of course, it harms Turkish people, but it harms more the Armenia, because they are stick to that problem and they cannot go beyond that problem. And all the suffering belongs to Muslims and Armenian people during the First World War. And this question should not be used by the Western states for their political purposes. And the events of 1915 should be examined in a transparent way. And for example, the developments in Karabakh, and of course it's an important development for Turkish-Armenian relations. And after the Karabakh War, and the sixth platform proposal is very important, and if Armenia is willing to join that platform, several steps should be taken. And thank you very much for your attention. I would like to thank Yıldız Deveci Bozkuş. Thank you. You draw a dark picture, but I agree with Tumanya. We need to discuss the enlightened ideas. And in the morning, there was an opening remark. Presidency Directorate of Communications, the Director of Communication referred to DINK, and you did the same, and a new page should be opened, and our problems should be solved by ourselves, on our own. And the Western parliaments, the decisions taken in the Western parliaments, actually, there is no way to implement them. And moreover, most of them are not accepted by the governments, and they are not binding, and these provisions are not binding. However, actually, of course, it harms Turkey and Armenia, and it also harms the democracy of two countries. And misuse and abuse of democracy actually is of course very important, and it's not. Of course, it's actually not an implication that is foreseen in democracy. And thank you very much, Ms. Bozkuş. And our next speaker is Ergün Kırlıkovalı.
Evet, ekranda görüyorum Sayın Ergün Kırlıkovalı'yı ama...
I can see Ergün Kırlıkovalı. His mic is off, I guess. I can see that your mic is off.
Sayın Ergün Kırlıkovalı... Evet, şimdi açıldı. Teşekkür ederim.
Yes, your mic is on now.
Buyurun efendim. Sayın Kırlıkovalı...
Mr. Kırlıkovalı,
çok aşina oldu. Türk görüşlerini...
all of us are very familiar with you actually. In the Turkish diaspora in the USA, you are one of the strongest voices defending our theses, our causes. Thank you very much, actually, for your moral courage and for sharing your accumulation of knowledge and experience this way. And Mr. Kırlıkovalı, Of course, has closely witnessed these incidents throughout his life. Also, his family came from the Balkans and they witnessed very closely the suffering, the pain of the Turkish people there. Personally, he graduated from Boğaziçi University, Chemistry Department in 1974, but his main field of activity is actually the Turkish American Societies Union in Washington and in North California, San Diego centered, and it is based there. And he is a very important person that gives voice to our thesis in Turkey. And we really believe he will provide us valuable information both about his experiences and the incidents. The floor is yours, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Now I'll share my screen.
Presentation in English because I'm talking to the Americans. So please let me open up my presentation. Can everybody see it? Okay.
The name of the
Presentation is the Armenian diaspora, the probable approach of the U.S. President and the U.S. Congress to the Turkish-Armenian conflict and its potential fallout. The Turkish-Armenian conflict, I'm a researcher and writer specializing in the late 19th and early 20th century Ottoman history with specific reference to Turkish-Armenian conflict. Having lived in California, which is home to a large Armenian community for most of my adult life, I also witnessed firsthand how some historical events are misrepresented by both religious and lay leaders of the Armenian diaspora. Some in the Armenian diaspora cultivate hatred for all things Turkish. They teach their children such feelings to keep the unity of the Armenian community and to prevent their young from being assimilated.
Evet, sesi de duyamıyoruz, görünümü de alamıyoruz yalnız.
We can't see you or hear you.
Teknik yardım lazım.
I think we need technical help.
Tüm projeksiyon görüşlerini de alamıyoruz.
We can't see your presentation.
Teknik yardım alabilir. Bir saniye.
I think I need technical help.
Share screen'e basıyorum. Şimdi görebiliyor musunuz?
Can you see my PowerPoint presentation now? Maybe we need technical help.
We can neither hear him nor see his power projection.
Şimdi?
Evet, yes. Now we see the power projection.
Okay, can I start over again, please?
Yes, please.
Okay. The name of my presentation is the Armenian diaspora, the probable approach of the U.S. President and the U.S. Congress to the Turkish-Armenian conflict and its potential fallout. The Turkish-Armenian conflict, I'm a researcher and writer specializing in the late 19th and early 20th century Ottoman history with specific reference to the Turkish-Armenian conflict. Having lived in California, which is home to a large Armenian community for most of my adult life, I also witnessed firsthand how some historical events are misrepresented by both religious and lay leaders of the Armenian diaspora. Some in the Armenian diaspora cultivate hatred for all things Turkish. They teach their young such feelings to keep them in unity and in the Armenian community, and to prevent their young from being assimilated into the dominant American culture. Because of my lifelong readings on the subject and living in the same urban settings with the Armenian diaspora for more than 43 years, I feel uniquely qualified to comment on the Turkish-Armenian relations. There's this Los Angeles Times article from 1990, which I think explains the situation well. It's a blur from there. Edna Petrosyan is only 6 years old, but she knows all about Armenia's enemies already. Now recite the poem I taught you, Taro Petrosyan instructs her daughter. Edna steps out of her mother's embrace, raises her head, puts her hands in her pockets, and with a face grave beyond her years, begins. It's better to be that I be a dog or a cat than a Turkish barbarian. The poem promises that when the Armenian wind blows, it will not leave a single Turk standing in Armenian land. This is Los Angeles Times, February 9, 1990. This is from a 6-year-old kid. This is in the 20th century, end of 20th century. This is now. This is the reality we're facing here. Kids are taught this kind of hatred. With President Joe Biden's pending 24th of April address to the nation, the hopes and expectations of the Armenian diaspora are that the president will finally utter the G word. If he does, that will be the first time since President Reagan uttered it back in 1981. Will he or won't he? If Biden uses the G word, what will its reverberations be? How will the Armenian diaspora react? Will Armenian bullying and intimidation and harassment already experienced plenty by the Turkic Americans turn to terrorism? What will the Armenian lobby do next? How will the U.S.-Turkey relations be affected by this political move by the president? I will try to cover these points in my 20-minute PowerPoint presentation, but I think we lost a few minutes. I don't know if we can make it up. I have about 40 slides. I may have to cut short, but I'll do my best. The month of April is awash with Armenian propaganda misrepresenting the history. At the heart of the malicious Armenian efforts is the desire to defend Turks and have the long discredited political claim of Armenian genocide recognized. They conveniently ignore the armed Armenian rebellions, terrorism, treason, territorial demands, and the suffering of the Muslims, mostly Turks, at the hands of Armenian revolutionaries. And to the remainder of the story, they inject heavy doses of hearsay, forgeries, and embellishments, and present it to the unsuspecting public as genocide. The Armenian lobby unfortunately finds fertile grounds for their distortions in the ethno-religious bias against Muslims in general and Turks in particular. Here's an original print from 16th century, the Hungarian National Museum, depict a Turkish warrior butchering infants. The Armenian lobby causes millions of dollars of hard-earned U.S. taxpayers' money to be squandered every year under the cover of humanitarian aid to Armenia. Armenia, a landlocked, poverty-stricken, violence-plagued, and corrupt country, is a client state of Russia where Russians pretty much own everything from energy to telecommunications. Just look at this chart. Total U.S. aid to Armenia in the last 20 years is 1.4 billion. Armenian population is 2.9 million. If you do the math, you see that each Armenian person got $478 of U.S. aid. Now, if U.S. gave $478 to every American, the U.S. would have to spend 158 billions. Now, that teaches a lot right there. Armenia had illegally occupied 20% of Azerbaijan and expelled at gunpoint 1 million Azerbaijanis from their homes. After 20 years of illegal occupation and fruitless peace talks at the Minsk group, Azerbaijan finally liberated its homeland from foreign occupiers after a 44-day epic war last fall. Armenia sold U.S. arms to Iran. The Guardian article titled U.S. Fury at Armenia over arms transferred to Iran, dated November 28, 2010, revealed that Armenia enabled Iran's purchase of rockets and machine guns in 2003. 4 years later, in 2007, some of these weapons were recovered in Iraq from two Shia militant attacks in which a U.S. soldier was killed and 6 others were injured. Perhaps the biggest blow to the Armenian lobby came from the European Court of Human Rights verdict on October 15, 2015, that will resonate for decades to come. Part of the ECHR's Grand Chamber ruling was that the Armenian genocide is an opinion, it can be rejected, and such rejection would be an exercise in free speech. Thus, it was determined by the highest court in Europe that rejecting the alleged Armenian genocide was not hate speech, as the Armenian lobby wants people to know. It was mere free speech. The ECHR further ruled that the alleged Armenian genocide could not be compared to the court-proven Holocaust. The latter had gone through the due process at a competent tribunal, and the intent was proven. Remember Nuremberg verdict of October 1st, 1946? On the history front, a formidable array of prominent historians, scholars, researchers, and experts in the history of the Ottoman Empire disputed the Armenian allegations of genocide. Here's what 69 of them said in a public statement that was published in New York Times and Washington Post on May 19, 1985. As for the charge of genocide, no signatory of the statement wishes to minimize the scope of Armenian suffering. We are likewise cognizant that it cannot be viewed as separate from the suffering experienced by the Muslim inhabitants of the region. The rate of evidence so far uncovered points in the direction of serious intercommunal warfare perpetrated by Muslim and Christian irregular forces, complicated by disease, famine, suffering, and massacres in Anatolia and adjoining areas during the First World War. To date, relevant archives in Turkey are open, and more than 100 countries have already sent their scholars there, except Armenia. Armenian archives are still closed. Limited access is given only to those who subscribe to the official Armenian narrative. So what are the Armenians afraid of? Against this backdrop, let's now turn our attention to the calls to the US President Joe Biden to recognize the long discredited political claim as Armenian genocide on April 24, 2021. Biden has been in politics for 48 years, serving 6 terms as U.S. Senator and 2 terms as Vice President. During all these years, Biden made it clear that he was a Philhellene and Armenophile. He voted for genocide recognition in the past and pledged in 2020 to do so again if elected president. Therefore, if Biden's voting record is any guide, Biden will probably utter the G word. Some argue that being a president is different than being a candidate. When a candidate becomes president, he's quickly reminded to put American interests before ethnic interests. Turkey is a valued NATO member with the second largest army. Turkey has been a bulwark of Western Defense Alliance during the Cold War and reliable ally for the US for more than 70 years. Turks fought bravely, shoulder to shoulder with Americans in Korea against communist aggression and were awarded the U.S. Congressional Medal of Honor for their valor. Turks also fought alongside with the U.S. soldiers against terrorism in Afghanistan, against ethnic cleansing in Kosovo, against sectarianism in Somalia, and against other evils elsewhere. Turkey is a strategic partner for the U.S. in the troubled Middle East. Turkey sits on arguably the single most important geography in the world. Surrounded by 3 seas and strategic waterways, Turkey is a most celebrated piece of earth. A country where 2 continents meet, East and West hug, religions flourish, civilizations overlap, the earliest human settlements and innovations for millenniums take root, ancient silk routes crisscross, energy corridors find a hub, and more. Recognizing the flawed Armenian narrative as genocide would be offensive to Turkey. A disappointed and incensed Turkey may be compelled to reconsider the U.S.'s reliability as an ally and may slowly disengage from the U.S.'s insults, threats, sanctions, embargoes, and schemes, almost all of which are initiated by the racist Armenian and Greek lobbies. It is true that there are other issues between U.S. and Turkey. The S-400 missile system Turkey bought from Russia in 2018 because the U.S. would not sell Patriots for political reasons or by demanding unfavorable terms. Turkey says these missiles will not be a part of the NATO system, so concerns of Russian access to NATO technology are overstated. Turkey needs this missile defense system against Syria and Iran, as NATO provides no missile protection in eastern half of Turkey. Turkey suggested formation of a Blue Ribbon Technical Investigation Committee to evaluate competing claims, which seems reasonable and fair. Then, of course, there is the issue of Fethullah Gülen, the primary school-educated cleric calling Pennsylvania home for more than 20 years. Gülen wanted in Turkey for plotting the 2016 coup where more than 300 innocent civilians lost their lives. There is an extradition agreement between the U.S. and Turkey, so such a request normally should not be a problem. But the U.S. says it is not convinced that Gülen is behind the coup. Turkey had sent many reams of documents connecting Gülen to the coup, but the U.S. remains unconvinced. The real reason may be that if the U.S. turns Gülen over to Turkey, then the U.S.'s indirect role in that coup may be exposed to the whole world during the trials. Others reject this claim as a mere conspiracy theory. Be that as it may, if Biden uses the G word on April 24th, he will be adding insult to injury. Whether that tips the scale in the U.S.-Turkey relations remains to be seen. At best, we can see a deep freeze descending upon the U.S.-Turkey relations. At worst, we may see a huge black hole appearing in Biden's roadmap where Turkey and its surroundings are. I can see major newspapers then publishing editorials asking who lost Turkey. The U.S. president did. The U.S. Congress did. The U.S. media did. The Armenian and Greek lobbyists did. We all did. Appeasing the nagging and dishonest Armenian lobby by taking their flawed narrative at face value should not have been more important than keeping the friendship and trust of a powerful, resourceful, and influential ally like Turkey for 70 plus years. The U.S. is built upon lands owned by Native Americans. Has any president recognized the Trail of Tears of 1840 and many other cases as acts of genocide? Then there was slavery in America for centuries, victimizing generations of African Americans. Has any president recognized the many centuries of bondage, torture, rapes, massacres, and persecutions as genocide? The Chinese, the Japanese, the Vietnamese, and other Asians were all discriminated against and persecuted at one time or another. Hispanics, Jews, Catholics were discriminated against and persecuted. Has any president recognized the many centuries of America's inhumanity to these many groups? Some 8 million people were massacred in Congo between 1886 and 1908. Millions of Ukrainian people and others perished in Holodomor and the Stalin purges of 1930s.
There are countless cases in history. Hereros, Namas, Cambodians, Ethiopians, natives of Brazil, Australia, Canada, Paraguay, Guatemala, on. And it's too long to list here, where humans inhumanity to human may better fit the description of genocide. Has any president recognized any of these? Why do you take tweets? Only the Armenian suffering out of a complex web of suffering that includes Turks, Arabs, Circassians, Jews, and others. Why such selective morality and hypocrisy? Why divide and polarize Americans on the basis of ethnicity and or religion with a one-sided view of history? Is the White House the proper institution to adjudicate genocide disputes? Or the U.S. Congress? Or media, academia, clergy? Of course not. There's one and only one institution that can do that. The International Court of Justice. The United Nations established the ICJ as a specialized court just for this purpose. That's why we call it a competent tribunal. Only cases tried after the 1951 convention and the intent to destroy is proven by the ICJ can be considered genocide. Examples are Holocaust, Rwanda, Srebrenica. The First Amendment prohibits government action motivated in whole or in part by viewpoint hostility. Evidence shows that a notable motivation for presidential recognition is hostility towards viewpoints that dispute the Armenian genocide claim. Such viewpoint discrimination constitutes a violation of the First Amendment. Then there's this. The presidential declaration is further unconstitutional because it will serve to demonize Turkish Americans as genocide deniers, which in turn will likely incite violence against Turkish Americans. A purpose to harm a politically vulnerable group violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. The threat of increased Armenian intimidation, violence, and terrorism victimizing Turkish Americans and Azerbaijani Americans is very, very real. Genocide was not recognized as a crime until the Genocide Convention of 1948, which entered into force on January 12, 1951. The universal prohibition on ex post laws would bar any genocide prosecution retroactively, as Article 24 of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Justice clearly states. I wrote to the president to urge him to put American interests before Armenian ones and refrain from using the G word on April 20. I asked him not to divide and polarize Americans, but unite and heal them instead. Turkic Americans want dialogue and peace. The Turkish culture and history are little known and mostly misunderstood in America, mainly due to the incessant misrepresentations by anti-Turkish lobbies. Even the wildest claims are readily believed and disseminated just because they defame Turks and vilify Muslims. Turkish Americans do not react effectively or timely to news, articles, events, or legislation that might impact their lives significantly. Their voices are hardly heard, arguably because the small size of their communities, the culture of shying away from being the ambassadors of their culture, lack of effective grassroots networks for political action, scarce resources made available for perception cultivation, little or no access to big media, print, audio, or visual, fear of backlash, intimidation, harassment, and violence by Armenian extremists, general ignorance on matters related to their heritage, lack of interest, enthusiasm, or concern, self-centeredness, indolence, and or procrastination, and other reasons. That said, though, I must add that Turkish Americans are much better organized nowadays. They have their own newspapers, radios, and TV programs. They get involved in the political process more. Last year, for example, we had 10 Turkish Americans running for office, and 4 of them won the election. More and more volunteers are stepping forward. If President Biden uses the G word, we will probably see an increase in Armenian propaganda misrepresenting Turkey and Azerbaijan as aggressors. They will try to tarnish these nations' image and set the stage for future Armenian demands for reparations and territory. In the process, they will whitewash the dreadful human rights record of the corrupt and violent Armenia, which until recently had illegally occupied up to 20% of Azerbaijan, expelling at gunpoint a million Azerbaijanis from their homes. But an Armenian propaganda will not be the only thing increasing. Armenian hate speech, intimidation, harassment, terrorism, and hate crimes are also expected to rise. On November 4th, 2020, in Beverly Hills, for example, a Turkish restaurant, the Cafe Istanbul that you see here, was attacked by a group of Armenian extremists. The Beverly Hills Police Department called it a hate crime. One young Armenian is in custody and charged with that hate crime. The Los Angeles Unified School District adopted 2 resolutions in 2020, denigrating Turkey, Turkish people, and Turkish Americans, as well as by association, Azerbaijan, Azerbaijani people, and Azerbaijani Americans. These resolutions declared April 24th a school holiday commemorating the alleged Armenian genocide. Turkish Americans in LA are extremely concerned about the safety of their children. As such, a day will intensify Armenian hate speech, bullying, and terrorism. The Armenian American lobby has aggressively promoted a distorted view of history while agitating for federal and state proclamations or resolutions defining the tragic World War I events in the Ottoman Empire as genocide. California Senate Bill SB 1915, introduced by Armenian Senators Puchigin and Speyer that you see here, and passed in the year 2000, would enable the alleged Armenians in California who have claims arising out of insurance policies in effect in Europe or Asia between 1875 and 1923 to bring legal action to recover on that claim. This self-serving law was struck down by the 2009 verdict of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit for usurping the federal government's foreign affairs powers and thus being unconstitutional. And a 2012 verdict by the same court threw out yet another lawsuit also related to the alleged genocide. The U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals dismissed in its 11-0 M-Bank ruling, unanimous ruling, another lawsuit on February 23rd, 2012, brought by Vasken Movsesyan, a priest at St. Peter Armenian Church in Glendale, on behalf of a group of Southern Californian Armenians in 2002. The court ruled that only the federal government has jurisdiction over foreign entities, preempting the state law. Now, this may be in jeopardy if Biden utters the G word. The U.S. Congress already recognized last October 29th, 2020. So this defense is taken away from our hands. 3 California state legislative bills, ACR 26, AB 1019, AR 2021, have been introduced since February. I stress, since February, within the last 60 days. 3 resolutions. All are related to the allegations of Armenian genocide and on the Armenian territorial claims against Turkey and Azerbaijan. Repeat, in the last 60 days, 3 resolutions in California state legislature. ACR 26, introduced by Armenian Assembly member Nazarian on February 8, 2021, will commend California businesses that have chosen to suspend business dealings with the Republic of Turkey. AB 1019, introduced by Assembly member Holden on February 18, 2021, will prohibit public employee retirement systems from investing in Turkey until Turkey recognizes the alleged Armenian genocide. Now, these retirement funds, they are huge. We're talking probably $1 trillion or so. So this is very important for Turkish trade. Please, let's all wake up. AR 21, introduced on February 8, 2021, and sponsored by Armenian Assemblyman Nazarian, is about the alleged Armenian genocide. The Armenian attempts to drag California legislature, public education, economy, and criminal justice institutions into the anti-Turkish witch hunt constitutes an abuse of representative democracy. If President Biden utters the G word, the Armenian diaspora will turn up its hate speech and harassment of the Turkish Americans, increase its propaganda and lawsuits against Turkey, cause more anti-Turkish resolutions to be introduced at city, state, and federal legislatures, and try to hurt Turkish economy by meddling with the U.S.-Turkey relations. Armenians will certainly try, but as always, they will not gain much because they lack the 2 most important sports, history scholarship and international law. Now, with my finishing remarks, I would like to wake up my friends, brothers, sisters, everyone, please. The fight is only starting. And we should be more educated, more motivated to wage our fight and win this thing. Because it is not getting easier or smaller or less important. It's getting more important. And when Turkey needs more trade and more foreign currency, Armenians will do their best to hurt Turkey through these resolutions. I am doing my part, but I want everybody to do their part also. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Ergün Bey. Thank you, Mr. Kılıkoğlu, for this very interesting presentation. We salute you for your courage and commend your unrelenting efforts.
Thank you.
Now, I have the pleasure to present as our next speaker, Dr. Christian Johannes Henry, an academician with a background in political sciences, international relations, and economics. He is well known in Turkey with his thesis or book on the Turkish foreign policy 2002 to 2012, called Turkey Between Regional Hegemonic Claims and Zero Problem Politics from a Perspective of Turkish-Armenian Relations. He fits in perfectly to this panel as we are discussing reflections of the past on contemporary developments. Dr. Henry, the floor is, or the screen is yours, please.
Thank you a lot. Sayın Büyükelçilik Kılıç.
Çok teşekkür ederim Sayın Büyükelçi Kılıç. Bir fırsat benim için, bu ekranları karşısında beni izleyen herkes için, Almanya'da, diğer ülkelerde de artık bu virüsten o kadar sıkılmış durumdayız ki umarım önümüzdeki yıl bir fırsat olur, Ankara'da tekrar buluşabiliriz, yüz yüze bir araya gelebiliriz diye düşünüyorum. Söylendiği üzere ben bu konuyla çok ilgileniyorum. 2005 yılında biri araştırmama Ermeni sorusuyla ilgili
in Germany following this topic. For example, my PhD supervisor told me I shouldn't continue with this topic if I want any academic career in Germany. But for now, I'm still in the field after 16 years. The only thing what changed in that time, in 2016, I stopped my membership for the government party CDU, Christian Democratic Union in Germany, after they adopted the genocide term, without ignoring all of my offers to inform the Bundestag group about the events. So then, after 21 years in that party, I quit this party. It was quite famous in the media, but yeah, it's already 5 years ago. So today I focus more or less on the way how is the Armenian question used as a political instrument. Because what my personal feeling is that this question all over the Western world is used against Turkish claims of being a member of European Union or of any other thing, is used against Turkish people and Turkey as a country. So then, one of the claims, or what you read a lot in newspapers, is the whole world are except the Armenian genocide or the genocide claims of Armenian people. Why are you an opposite to that? This is one of the most questions asked to me, or sometimes not even a question. Questions would be nice, then you can answer and discuss. Mostly it's more a threat or something like, why are you doing that? I was thinking about what is the whole world? It's a good question. Since the problem of the Western world is that we have always, in all kinds of world politics, we have a Eurocentristic way of watching others. So what is the world? The world are 197 sovereign states. The whole world also 7.3 billion people. But if we check, so my research is not as actual as from my distinguished colleague Mrs. Boskus. There are some states more now accepting it, but I went in that research to the dates about 2016, which states adopted it at that time. So these 23 states are just nearly 12% of all countries. So that is already one of the one little hint that the Western world seems that they are the basic of whole world life. So 12 countries claim to be the whole world. So I'm not very good in math, but I understand that 12 is not the majority of 100. So the Armenian genocide claimed accepting countries represent 670 million people, citizens. That is just 8.4% of the world population. Also, that figure shows that the Western world has that, how can I say, a big arrogance to think that they're representing the world. They don't. It's just a minority accepting the genocide claims, and even with the few countries more accepting it in the time between 2016 and 2021, it is not a change to a majority. So what is better in that case is what the other colleagues already mentioned. The Armenian propaganda is much more professional than from Azerbaijan or Turkey. Let's just give one example from my personal academic career. In these 16 years, my research center, or also the time at University Siegen, we wrote one application to another, to Turkish foundations, German foundations, Azerbaijani foundations, and just one time we get a research project funded. My colleagues who are on the Armenian side, they get every year some projects to finance their research. So that is one of the biggest problems in that field. The German politics and academic fields and foundations, of course, not interested in an objective view on that field, but the Turkish and the Azerbaijan side who are interested are not willing to pay anything for it. So that is one of the bad results I faced after all these 16 years researching on that topic. So it's a standalone. Even a couple of years ago, I talked in the embassy in Berlin, the Turkish embassy in Berlin, that at least we need a network, that I know just one call and I need a list with all colleagues all over the world who are in that field. Even that data is not available. And these are some advices already now, because I know they are very influenceable people here in the audience. Just that is not a thing with lots of cost. Just make an Excel file, write every politician, scientist, historian, whatever in that list with the email data, and then we have it easier to share resources or other things. So then to the next. Who accept the Armenian genocide claim? It's also interesting in the academic field to understand what is the claims, or who are these people who claim something, what are their personal interests, where they're coming from. So in that way, I checked these countries, it's Argentina, Armenia, Austria, so we don't need to go through every country, you know, most probably the flags. But if we check them a bit more in detail, I took all these countries in a matrix, and I had 4 categories to ask for. Like the first one, which of these genocide claims accepting countries have a majority of Christian population? So every one of these countries who accept the Armenian genocide claim have a Christian majority, except Lebanon. But Lebanon, we know they have a minority of about 20-25% Armenians, so that is a special case. But except Lebanon, all other countries have a Christian minority. So even if in history or also in political science, the religion shouldn't be one of the issues I decide something. Here it is something like this, because we will see later how are the countries deciding their genocide claims or their genocide bills or this stuff. We made some research about the decision-making process. It will be later in the presentation. On the second scale, or the second part of the table, we see the question, who has a significant Armenian population? And if you check this, then there are also a majority of this. So I will show it now in a better way that you can see it in figures. So just in the numbers, if you check the Christian majority population, you see the red one is yes, they have a Christian majority. No is this one country, Lebanon. So then the significant Armenian population is still a lot. Yeah, we have some more with no Armenian population, but the biggest one is Argentina, it's Switzerland, it's France, it's United States. We already talked about the California side. So they have a very big Armenian population, and the propaganda is running there. Then it's quite funny. I took who has a warlike past with Turkey. So which of these countries have been in war with Turkey during the history? Because my wife is a Slovak, and she told me that they have Slovak poems also read and sung to their children about the cruelty of the barbarians, of the Ottoman barbarians. Even if the nowadays historians proved that in Slovakia no slaughter or massacre or anything occurred by the Ottoman Empire, but the poems or the songs are still there. So, for example, I will go back to this one. So the shared history with war is Armenia, of course, Austria. Twice the empire was in front of the capital, Vienna. Then Cyprus, France, and Greece, Italy, Lebanon, and so on. Then here Poland, Russia, Slovakia. So, of course, they have also a personal interest in playing something like a revenge, maybe obviously, or it can also be that just there's some hidden feeling of the people. Like you can't say directly it's because of this, like in Austria. You have a big minority in Austria who is against the Turkish EU membership, even much more than in Germany. And the people in this field research about it, and they said it's also because of this history with the Ottoman Empire being twice in the siege and in front of Vienna. So even if the people didn't name it, that this is the reason, but it's something like the common shared history and with some bad intent and bad memories about this Ottoman Empire time. So, and the other one is the significant number of Turkish migrant workers, like what we called in Germany Gastarbeiter, the working migration in the 60s starting. That's also interesting because it is a very special kind of people. When you have these migrant workers, they came without any deeper education. They were just invited for 5 years. It can't be prolonged to 10 years. They should just work and not integrate into the societies. But then time changed, as we all know, and from guest workers became normal legal migrants with families and making their home in Germany. But these people, of course, are different than to the normal average of the Turkish society in Turkey. So, with due to all respect, I don't want to say anything bad about these people, but it's different if I talk with Turkish academicians or if I talk to former Turkish guest workers. The manners, the behaviors, and all these problems, they also are reasons for these countries where are these guest workers in a big group, that there are some ressentiments about this. And then it's also what my colleague Kovale said already before. I made a research who of these countries who accept the genocide term, what kind of history they have according to genocides in their own history, and do they accept their own crimes or don't they? For example, Argentina and Chile, they but just 2 years ago, they were sued by the native Chileans and Argentinians called Mapuche for the international court about this torturing and massacres, rapes and genocide between 1860 and 1934, and they both don't accept it. The colleague already named the German history. Of course, you can say, yeah, Germany accept the Holocaust. Yes, we did, but we don't accept genocide in Namibia, the former German Southwest Africa, on the Hereros and Namas. You can prolong, or you can check the list here. Down there, we have in France. Yeah, France is a topic very known and very emotional for Turkish people. The Algerian War. It's nothing else. If you take the same categories as they do for the Armenian claim, then it's of course a genocide on the Algerian people. And also the Rif War in Morocco, where Germany delivered the gas and France used the gas against the people in the Rif War. So all these parts of their history, or these dark parts of their history, are not considered as a genocide. Of course, not in Cyprus, the bloody Christmas, when lots of Turkish people were murdered on the Cyprus island. It was never considered as a genocide. I mean, I heard that my distinguished colleague Johannes from Cyprus University. That is a slap in the face of the people of Cyprus, of the Turkish Cyprus part, because this is the newer history. About the Nagorno-Karabakh problem, we also know that there was, even after the Khojaly massacres, the BBC team there, and they made the footprint, the photo documentation and the video documentation of the massacres made on people, on civil people in that region committed by the Armenian and Soviet Union forces. Also, this is not recognized as genocide. So, to put this all in a row, we can see that in all ways of how can I say, politics towards Turkey, the Western world is dealing with double standards. It's not just in the European Union accession process. Also in that case, there are genocide claims against Turkey, even if the historians in the first panel talked already about it, if these claims are not even provable. And we talk about a genocide. A genocide is a penal code topic. So if the Armenian lobby would be so clear about these claims, why are they not going to a court? Because they don't have a clear evidence. They need to open their own archives, and they will see what the Dashnaks and Injaks do against their own people first, and then against the Ottoman civil people. So that is also one of the parts we are mostly forgetting. The first murders on the Ottoman Armenian people were made by Russian Armenian groups who wanted to destroy the 800 or 1,000 years of peace living in the Ottoman Empire. So, but I don't want to touch the historical events too much. But let's focus now on the parliamentary decision-making process. That is a very interesting thing. For example, the Argentinian Senate. The Argentinian Senate was discussing this issue, and they just accepted. So there was not a long discussion. It was something about the protocols, about 10 minutes, 15 minutes discussion. And the only reason was that other big countries, also like European Parliament and United Nations, accepted. That was the reason why the Argentina Parliament accepted this genocide claim. Uruguay was even more interesting. They accepted the genocide bill just because Argentina did so. So there was not even a discussion. It was just directly rise up the hands and it's done. So what is for me very, as a political scientist, not acceptable, how can I decide in a foreign parliament about another country's history? That is already something what I wouldn't accept. History doesn't belong to parliaments, especially not to foreign parliaments. But on the other hand, if I want to do so, why are not having open-minded discussion first? I mean, it is a very hard claim, the term genocide, so I need to show respect to both sides and let then the historians on both sides talk in the parliament, or let them make their points. But just saying, oh, European Union did, so we do also, and then Argentina did, so we do also, is for me a completely undemocratic act. Slovakia, the home country of my wife, they had a long discussion about the Turkish-EU accession negotiation process. And while this discussion was running, just one colleague raised the hand and he said, I was recently reading the novel from Franz Werfel, The 40 Days of Musa. So there was a genocide. I would like if we call it also genocide. And then there was two other calling, yeah, okay, it's fine, we have no problem with it. And then it was decided that Slovakia accepted as a genocide. So it's also very interesting. Based on the novel, they decided about the history of Turkey. So how can I make a decision on a novel? And even Franz Werfel said in his later days, or the last month of his life, he said he was also forced to write it in that way in the book. So even there was from the Armenian minorities a pressure on him to write the book as he did. So the novel seems to be a good resource for Slovak parliament to decide, but the thousands of documents which are available in the Ottoman archives, where I had the honor to research there, they are not a proof. That is interesting. And even the Armenian archives were at least close to that time when I wanted to access them until 2015. Nowadays, just a couple of weeks ago, someone told me that they are now open in the same conditions as Turkey, like just academics, no politicians, no journalists, but it's not proved. It's just what I heard a couple of weeks ago. I want to ask again about this, if it's true or not, because also there is a big lying propaganda around. So then we have the EU Parliament and Copenhagen criteria. It's another proof for the double standards and for the undemocratic behavior of the Western world. For example, you all know, since you're interested also in the Turkish European Union accession negotiation process, the Copenhagen criteria are made for new member states in the European Union, and they are set and for everybody who wants to be a member. But the EU Parliament made a decision that Turkey should accept first the genocide claims before we can negotiate with them the membership, the full membership in the European Union. So why do we have now a Lex Turkey? It is completely undemocratic and without any legal acceptance to make an extra criteria just for Turkey. So it's another point where the Western world shows their double standards and their undemocratic and illegal behavior to Turkey. So if we come then to this final point, that these double standards are all over Turkey, like you see it in the EU negotiation process, you see it in the Armenian genocide claim, even in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, we have the double standards, even lying in the media. So since the October start of the war in Karabakh or Nagorno-Karabakh again, I'm writing every week lots of emails to our newspapers because they are writing completely false news. For example, the last week I wrote to the biggest German newspaper portal. It's called NTV, like in Turkey NTV, but it's a different company. They wrote that Azerbaijan started a weapon attack on Armenia. They said, no, they didn't. Armenia was not even part of the war. There is just one region, as you know, I don't need to tell you, there's just one region from all considered as a part of Azerbaijan, and this part was freed after more than 20 years of illegal occupation, and just this happened. So on the other case, Armenia, as a not involved republic, they shoot weapons and missiles over the border and tried to reach Baku and they reached Ganja and killed many people. And this is not covered. So, but of course, as you guess, I didn't get any answer from any of these newspaper portals. Probably I'm on the red list, so maybe once when I'm in Turkey, I can't come home. I'm waiting for it. So what I said in the beginning already, we have this problem in the academic field that we are not very good connected. I have one friend in Sweden, one friend in the Netherlands, but at least this guy from the Netherlands already dropped the field, is in a normal job as a lawyer, because it was so hard to get any research projects on this topic. The money from European sources are not for that way. They are going into the other direction. And as I said, in Azerbaijan, I mean, both countries have their reasons. Azerbaijan says the oil price is so low that we have not even enough money for our budget, so we can't spend it for other things. And in Turkey, it was the same discussion. First, they said the lira is so bad, and others said we don't have even a budget for that. So the excuses are good, but it would be better to have foundations. Or as the colleague said, the war just started, or the fight just started, but every war or fight will be lost if you don't have the money to buy supply weapons and ammunition. And the weapons and ammunitions are supporting scientists and academics and academic research. So that is the most important thing. And the third point of my conclusion is the network. So even if we don't want to talk about money for any reasons, then at least make this Excel file. Just connect all us together. That if I have a symposium, English-speaking symposium, that I know I can invite Pat Walsh, I can invite this and that, so that we know the email addresses and in which languages they can deal in the conference. Just this would be already good. Or that we know maybe in a group or in a WhatsApp group, that we know what are the projects running now. Maybe there's some questions open what others already answered. We can save time in that way, that we can use each other and cite each other in projects. So from that part, I have two other examples in the final as my last statement, two examples how this academic field works in Europe. For example, I was invited to the University of Bonn to a conference like this, what we are doing now. Not as a speaker, I just went there as audience. And the main speaker was the Switzerland historian Hans Lukas Kieser. I'm sure that some of you will know him very well. So he spoke about 1 hour, very nice, and everything what he said was right. It was nothing wrong. The only thing is, he was not showing the other side of the matter. So he, in this 1 hour, he was not talking about one dead Muslim murdered by Armenians or Russians. So then in the end, I asked, like I said, Hojam, yeah, my professor, what is with the murdered Muslims or Turks from the Armenian groups, like Dashnak and Hinjak? And then he said, that was not part of my project. I focused on the Armenian genocide and not on the other side. So, I mean, most of the audience people here are academicians. How can you make a research project and just focus on one side? It is completely unacademic, but he is a professor. So it was hard for me to understand that these people can be a professor, and everyone says, oh, nice work, he did a very good book, and blah, blah, blah. And it's not a good book. It's just half of the work. If I study on the Holocaust side, and I would say, yeah, I was just focusing on the crimes the Jews did to the Germans, and I don't focus on the German side, then I would say, yeah, of course the Jews were killed, because they were just aggressive. They steal some bread in the Warsaw ghetto, and they destroyed some windows. But I have to focus on that, what the Nazis did, if I talk about the genocide. So why don't I have to talk about the Armenian revolutionary groups when I talk about the Armenian genocide? It belongs together. And Mr. Kilic as ambassador probably lost also people from Asala group. All these ambassadors and diplomats who were killed by them with their families and these happenings. They're all, these murders happened because the Western world motivates the Armenian terrorists that they are somehow with the right claim there. No, but it's not the right claim. It's a wrong claim, and they are just poisoned in their brains by their parents and teachers and other things. So the problem is not the Armenian people today. So my claim, I always want that Armenians, Azerbaijanis, and Turks come together. Because the people are these who suffer in the end for some stubborn politicians. But the international community needs a fair and open-minded approach towards Turkey in all kinds of things. The same is, but then it's really my last point, but I think sometime it's still on me. It's the same when we criticize the Turkish government for anything what they're doing. I don't care who is governing Turkey. I'm a German. If the AKP is running the office or if JMB is running the office, I just should watch objective what is good and what is wrong, like I do in the German government if it's Social Democrats or Christian Conservatives. But what I realize now, everything what is made in Turkey is just portrayed in the media by the bad sides. So they always say, like the Turks in Germany vote Erdogan, if they want, they should go back to the dictatorship to Turkey and live there. But that is not the question. The question is, why are they voting or electing him? So no one in Germany can tell you why are Turks voting mostly for Erdogan. That, for example, the children death rate at the birth time is reduced by 50%, or the Turkish life expectation rise by 10% in Erdogan's administration. All these points are not covered. The health insurance system unemployment aid, all this time are not covered. So they just show if a journalist is imprisoned, what is of course bad if journalists imprisoned for no reason, of course, but is there a reason? We don't know it. How can I say in Germany if someone is for right or for wrong reason in a prison? I don't see the suitcase. But they always talk about this, and that is what I don't like. Let's be open-minded. If there is something what is bad in the government, of course we can criticize it as well as we can criticize in Germany, but we just look with bad eyes to Turkey, and that is my final word. I'm very sad about it, and I'm optimistic, that is my nature, that in future we will come back to our long-time German-Turkish friendship. That is my wish for the future. Thank you a lot. And see you again.
Dr. Christian Johannes Nervi,
Yahya Bey yeter.
thank you for this very interesting and sobering presentation. We are running out of time, I know, but I did not want to interrupt this and the previous very interesting presentations. And I also would like to commend you for your civil courage. And I'll also, just a footnote, I would say, I happen to know during my days in Switzerland, Dr. Hans-Lukas Kieser, and unfortunately, he is not the exception for the example you have given. Now we come to the final speaker of our session, and he is also a very familiar face watching these conferences, Dr. Patrick Walsh, a historian, a political analyst, and a teacher. He is a very prolific and proficient writer, author. He has written books on the First World War, Germany, Ottoman Turkey, Russia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and his latest book, The Second War in Karabakh, is waiting to be published. So, Dr. Walsh, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. And thank you to the Directorate for a very interesting and rewarding conference today. Honourable participants. I'll share my screen now. Hopefully this will come up okay. Let's just see that. That's okay. I think that's sharing okay. Yes. So
Yes, we see it.
Good. So, good. Okay. So, this afternoon, I'd like to talk about 1915 in the light of recent events in Karabakh and the South Caucasus. And, ask the question, what do events in Karabakh and the South Caucasus tell us about 1915? So a bit of an opposite thing that historians usually do, actually. Okay. So I want to ask, what is the implications or the importance of the South Caucasus for the Turkish defense of 1915 as well? First of all, then, if we look at the Armenian narrative, what is it? Essentially, it says this. The Armenians are helpless, innocent victims. The Ottoman response in 1915 was unjustified. The Armenians deserved a national state, and a different outcome in 1915 was both possible and preferable. And these are the ideas underlying the Armenian narrative of 1915, even though they are not always explicitly expressed or stated. Okay, so the Armenian experience in South Caucasus is very relevant to judging whether the Ottomans were right in 1915 for a number of reasons. Well, firstly, we can see what the Armenians have done with state power themselves. We can see whether Armenian nationalism is a positive force in the region. And thirdly, we can see how Armenians treat minorities they rule over. So we can get a good idea of what would have happened without the relocations in 1915. Okay, so let's look at the Armenian state building experience first of all. Looking first at the First Republic and after this time, right? So in 1918, 1920, we had the Yerevan Republic. I mean, even Armenians see this as a disaster. There's many apologetic works being produced, like Richard Hovhannissian's defending the record of the Dashnak government, but the facts speak for themselves. Papazian, for instance, notes there were 3 lost wars in succession against all its neighbors. The first Armenian Prime Minister, Johannes, I always find his name difficult to say, Kachaznudu, told the party convention in 1923 about how the necessary constructive state building work had been completely ignored in favor of dubious state expansion work. The result, widespread famine, disease, hundreds of thousands of deaths among the Armenian population, not to mention other people. A British report at the time, it was sent to Oliver Wardrop, the High Commissioner in the Southern Caucasus at the time. It could be a description of today. The politics of the Yerevan Republic are dominated by notorious Armenian secret society known as the Dashnaktsiyon. Its present policy in the Caucasus is centered on 1, the acquisition of territory for the Yerevan Republic, 2, the extension and equipment of the Armenian armed forces, 3, the propagation of the doctrine of the Dashnaks. It seems impossible that sound democratic government will be attained in the Yerevan Republic until the activities of this society have been ended. The society, by its methods of terrorism, prevent the better and broader-minded elements of Armenian society from taking up official positions. Will we ever see the better elements of Armenian society taking up official positions even a century afterwards? The Bolsheviks, effectively the Bolsheviks, let's do them some credit. They saved Armenia in 1920-21 from self-destruction, and probably from the destruction of everyone else in the region. The Soviets revived Armenia through curtailing its nationalism, particularly during the Stalin period. Let's give Joseph Stalin some credit, because a lot of people come out with credit when you compare them to the Armenians. The Bolsheviks come out with credit. Joseph Stalin comes out with credit. Okay? Afterwards, as things were relaxed by Khrushchev and then by Gorbachev, Armenian nationalism was again unleashed, and the process of self-destruction and destruction of others was recommenced. So let's have a look at the Second Republic and its record. First, we have territorial expansion, which was again given precedence over state building. The Armenian Republic grew in size as a result of its victory in the 1990s. But again, size was actually prioritized over substance, okay? And so we have economic disaster. We have, inflation rampant, GDP halved since the Soviet days, demographic disaster occurring with high migration, people voting with their feet to leave Armenia. 1 million out of 4 million left after it left the Soviet Union. Compare that to Azerbaijan, where 7 million, 6.5 million at the time of they left the Soviet Union, and 10 million today. You can see the contrast. Mostly are left for employment in Russia, lots of part-time work. Social disaster, high unemployment, poverty. And the 2020 war teaches the lesson that a functional state is needed to win wars. In 1991-94, Azerbaijan lacked this. In 1920, it had it, and Armenia didn't. Armenia did not understand this. Both its capacity and will to fight in Karabakh was depleted by the failure of state. Only Levon Ter-Petrosian understood this, but even he couldn't curtail Armenian nationalism to make a functional settlement to arrest the process that ultimately defeated them in the war. Okay, so Armenia was incapable of developing Karabakh. There's Agdam, which I think I would call Armenia's victory park, because there's been so much sniping against Azerbaijan's victory park in Baku, but this is Armenia's victory park. The ruins are a testament to its failure. And what else has happened? There's been a surrender of independence to Russia. And the question really is whether territorial expansion is of more importance than a functional state to the Armenians. I mean, that is the predicament that Nikol Pashinyan was placed on, and he promised so much and he failed to deliver, and he got himself into a more destructive war. He was the great hope, and now he's claiming he's going to put the Armenian army under the auspices of the Russian army. So this is where he's led back to square one, actually one step forward, two steps back. So in the end, a functional state is an imperative for all aspects of development. So let's look at Armenian nationalism. It's produced the most ethnically and religiously homogeneous state in the region. It's still obsessed with territorial expansionism, despite all the disasters it has brought. It has a strong, myopic sense of self-importance, the Armenians. They're disabled by their own misinformation and disinformation. There's a big talk about this in California at the minute, about how misinformation and disinformation is destroying Armenia, and who is producing it? The Armenian diaspora. So they've become victims of the sword they've been wielding for a century. Territory before people, a big problem. And essentially, Armenian nationalism is incapable of compromise and accommodation without actually being military subdued by exterior forces, either by the Turks, by the Bolsheviks, or by the Azerbaijanis. Peace is never made unless they get subdued in the first place. You know, there's a picture of Armenia, the vast state of Armenia, and what it would like to hold. There's no consideration about whether it has enough people to hold such a state. It's just, you know, an objective, and it's pursued relentlessly. Okay, so Armenian treatment of ethnic minorities. Well, the Uravan Republic became overwhelmingly Armenian. Erevan itself had been a Khanate until the 1820s, 1830s. It had around a 50-50 Christian-Muslim population in 1900. In 1919, around a quarter of its population was still non-Armenian. Zengezur was largely depopulated of non-Armenians during 1918 and 1921 by people who subsequently fought for the Nazis. Professor Malcolm Yap of the London School of Economics made a very good comment about, he made a review of Richard Hovhannissian's third volume of the Republic of Armenia, and he stated this pretty well. He said, ethnic cleansing was a term not then used, but its practice was everywhere. The Armenians of the Republic wanted to dominate Karabakh and to clear the Muslims out of the Aras Valley and resettle the region with Armenians. The majority of Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh saw it dangerous and advocated a much more moderate line of compromise. As in so many similar episodes, the position of the moderates was undermined by the hotheads, organized in partisan bands. And in the end, it was the moderates who suffered most of the abortive rising of March 1920. The militants blamed the British for the disaster. It is also clear the Armenian adventures in Karabakh and along the Aras contributed to the breakdown of government in Azerbaijan, the establishment of Soviet power in the Republic in April 1920, and eventually the subversion of Armenia itself. So, you know, that's the some achievement of the Armenian First Republic. So, what's coming to sort of near the conclusion? what's the story of of this? Well, militarized Armenians against vulnerable Muslim communities. You know, we see them. 1915, Van and Eastern Anatolia. 1918, 1920, Erzurum, Kars, Ardahan. 1918 to 20, Baku, Guba, Karabakh, Zangezur, and Uravan. And 1988, 94, Yerevan and Karabakh. So the common factor is that when the power of state is absent to protect ordinary citizens, Armenian militants fill the vacuum. Okay, so conclusion then. In conclusion, a number of things are apparent. Firstly, the experience in the Southern Caucasus has tended to confirm the correctness of the decision of the Ottomans to resist the establishment of an Armenian state in Eastern Anatolia. Secondly, how the Armenians have behaved since adds weight to the position that nothing else could have been done in 1915 that would have produced a better result, despite the tragedy that occurred. Thirdly, the Armenian state actually established has proved too much for the Armenians to manage effectively, even in its existing size. However, Armenian nationalism has proved incapable of learning these lessons. The consequences have been continued cycles of warfare and disaster for the Armenians and instability in the Southern Caucasus. So I think these facts need to be emphasized in information relayed to the West. They represent powerful obstacles to an acceptance of this simple, simplistic Armenian narrative and a campaign for genocide recognition. Parliaments may still pass motions, but states which have to deal with reality perhaps will be more swayed by factual information like this. To finish off, last slide. In terms of future prospects, there are two possible scenarios. A positive one in which Armenia makes a functional peace in the region that leads to good relations with its neighbors. The Second Republic becomes part of a developing regional economy, freed from the obstacles of the occupation of Azerbaijani territory, and it develops economically. Armenia proceeds towards reaching an accommodation with Turkey over historical issues as part of a general reconciliation process. A more negative scenario would involve Armenia determining to rebuild for another war over Karabakh, with a hope that a future weakening of the Azerbaijan state might present another revanchist opportunity. In such a scenario, Armenia would subjugate itself and become almost a complete dependency of Russia, with the hope that Moscow would assist another push against Karabakh. This would obviously maintain the existing hostility towards Turkey and Turks and continue the genocide recognition campaign. So future prospects are essentially hope against history. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Patrick Walsh. It has indeed been an excellent concluding presentation and giving us the balance between hope and history. That was good. And your presentation has been most explicit and thought-provoking. So, as such, we come to the end of our session. We have already run out of our time, but there are numerous questions, comments to every single speaker. So I suggest to prolong just a few more minutes our session to give every speaker a chance to at least comment on one question. But before doing that, one of our speakers in the previous panels, Professor Dr. Seyit Serçelik, asked for a word to contribute to our session. So the floor is yours, Professor Serçelik. Sayın Serçelik'ten bekliyoruz bir yorum. Ondan
We
sonra
are waiting for Mr. Serçelik's comment and then we will proceed.
Sayın Serçelik duyuyor mu acaba?
Can you hear me, Mr. Sarçelik?
Sayın Büyükelçim.
Ben ekranda
Distinguished
göremiyorum.
Ambassador?
Ben ekranda göremiyorum. Eğer yoksa sorulara geçelim.
I cannot see you on the screen. Distinguished Ambassador?
Saniye. Sayın Büyükelçim.
Distinguished Ambassador?
Yes, please. Sayın
Biliyor musunuz?
Can you hear me?
efendim,
Sayın Büyükelçim ben sizi duyuyorum ama benim sesim gelmiyor mu?
gelmiyor sesiniz efendim.
Ben nasıl yapalım?
Bilmiyorum sesinizi nasıl oradan açabilir. Sayın Serçelik beni duyuyormuş ama sesi gelmiyor bize. Acaba teknik
Mr.
olarak
Sarçelik can
açabilir miyiz?
hear me, but I cannot hear him, so can you help us with this technical problem?
Sayın Büyükelçim ben aktarsam siz iletseniz olmazsa çözemezsek.
Bilmiyorum yani nasıl bir teknik...
Biz duyuyoruz aslında. Hocam biz sesinizi alıyoruz.
Öyle mi? Tamam.
Evet.
Konuşuyorum o zaman.
Buyurun, buyurun efendim.
Sayın Büyükelçim
Distinguished Ambassador? Professor Yıldız said something about the competing figures and the number of people who died. It could be 1.5 million or 1.6 million. It's not important. And she said, I don't know whether she would like to correct the statement or if she would allow, I would like to comment on this. You said that it doesn't matter, it could be 600,000 or 1.5 million or 2 million. And it was understood that 600,000 Armenians died in the Ottoman Empire. This is what you said, and this was misunderstood, I believe. I can tell you that the number of people who died was 150,000, and the Russian intelligence officers had the habit of adding another zero at the end of the figures. This is why it was given as 1.5 million. And so while making our comments, we should be more careful, I believe. And you said that 50 countries recognized the events of 1915. Up to now, only 30 countries recognize them, and only some states of the United States recognize them. And I just needed to make a correction at this point. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Thank you very much, Mr. Sarçelik, for this reminder. And now, if you allow me, we have lots of questions, but I will go through them and ask one question to each of the panelists. I will start with Professor Ömer Turan. Dr. Münevver Aktaş has a question to you. For the missionary activities in Anatolia, were the missionaries allowed to carry out such activities by the Ottoman state? Were the Ottoman state informed of their missionary activities? This is the question.
Tabii biz 100 yıllık dönemden bahsediyoruz. 1820'de başladılar, 1920 farklı dönemlerde
long
farklı
period. In
tavırlar
different periods, different attitudes were shown or actions were taken. In the first half of the 19th century, for example, the Ottoman administration for the Protestant missionaries and going through the Orthodox and non-Muslim communities, the administration regarded it as a problem among the non-Muslim communities, the Christians themselves, which did not affect the general population. So they tolerated it until it reached a level of disturbing the whole population in general. And then with the patriarchs and the missionaries, there was a sort of a race, a pride competition. We can say they didn't let them in their cemeteries. For example, those who became Protestant and died weren't accepted in the cemeteries, and then these problems rose, and even the administration officials even had to go to the cemeteries to intervene. And then in the 19th century, in the second half of the 19th century, the missionary activities, their dimension was recognized. In 1868, there was an ordinance that was issued, so we should have a look at it from that perspective. So in terms of putting everything in order, including education and schools, and in the last part of the 19th century, during the rule of Abdulhamid, and opening up new modern schools in Anatolia was important in terms of raising individuals that could fight against the missionary activities in Anatolia. And during these Armenian incidents, the events, the Ottoman administration was disturbed, but they were weak, so they couldn't cope with them. And about the number of schools, sometimes they were not allowed, no permission was given, so they didn't permit one school, but another school was opened under a different name as the branch of a different school. So they sorted the way out how to open a new school. So there was no problem in that sense. So the Ottoman state could not cope with them very well. They knew it. They followed up their activities. They tried to audit the activities, educational activities at school, but it wasn't sufficient. And during the national struggle after World War I, in the American college, for example, there were some incidents and the school was closed down. And then after that, all missionary institutions would be shut down and schools would be closed. This was the decision. But in order to be on better terms with the USA, I mean not to disturb the relations with the USA, the missionary institutions, or in other terms, the charity institutions of the USA were allowed to operate in Anatolia. So in this context, in Bursa, there was an American school, and a child converted to Christianity, which created a great backlash, and the school was closed down. So in that period, the missionaries put forth the concept of Christianity. I named Christianity, and actually the state also didn't intervene these modern Western type education schools because they needed them, so they were allowed to operate but supervised, audited. Those who didn't abide by the rules were shut down. So this is what I can say as a very brief summary. Thank you very much, Mr. Turan.
The next question is for Professor Yıldız Deveci Bozkuş. From another speaker from a previous panel, David Salzman, from Mr. David Salzman. The question is, what would you recommend as a first step toward reconciliation between Turkey and Armenia? Who should take it?
Sesim geliyor mu Sayın Kelçin? Öncelikle küçük bir düzeltmeyle başlamak isterim. Seyit Hocam'la belirttiğim gibi burada bir yanlış anlaşılıyordu sanırım. Çünkü bu katlettik sayılar Türk tarafının değil, tam tersi Ermeni tarafının sürekli ortaya attığı rakamlar. İşte bazı kaynaklarda 3 milyon Ermeni olduğu, bazılarında 2 milyon Ermeni olduğu dair iddialar var. Dolayısıyla bu ölüleri yarıştırma ifadesi Ermeni tarafı için kullanılmalı. Ermenilerin ortaya attığı iddialarla ilgili bir ifade. İkinci olarak Smoker iddialarını kabul eden ülkeler için kastettiğim, orada Amerika'da 50 eyaletin 49'unda kabul edilmiş anlamında söyledim. Orada bir yanlış anlatım. Son olarak katılımcının sorusuna ilgili. Bence çözüm noktasında Türkiye buraya kadar birçok kez elini uzattı Ermenistan'a. Artık Ermeni tarafının da sorumluluk alması gerekiyor. Bu noktada Ermeni tarafının ortak tarihçiler konusunda önerisini kabul etmesi çözüm için bir başlangıç olabilir diye düşünüyorum. Teşekkür ederim Sayın Büyükelçim.
Evet. Teşekkür ediyorum Sayın Bozkuş.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Bozkuş.
Bundan sonraki sorumuz
The next question
Sayın Ergün Kırlıkovalı'ya.
is for Ergün Kırlıkovalı.
Amerika Birleşik Devletleri'nde
In the USA,
pardon şu.
sorry,
Birkaç tane soru var da.
there are a few questions actually. Let me ask the first one.
Ermeni soykırımı yasa tasarılarının
The Armenian Genocide bills. What is your comment on their timing?
29 Ekim 2020'de
On 29th October since 2020, since then the Congress has drafted such bills. Is there such a connection in that respect? Yes, there's certainly such a connection actually. When it comes to policy, the USA takes help from experts. If they want to hurt a community, a group of people, they find their vulnerability, and the councils tell them what their vulnerability is, their hotspot is. So if you are to do this, then you should do this on 29th of October, which is the Republic Day in Turkey. So do not fool anyone. All of these were premeditated, planned, and the background was studied very well. This is how they do it all the time. I mean, they do such a thing as such a date that everybody reacts and is affected. In California, Massachusetts, and in similar states, the politicians have Armenians as their aides, and they are the ones who are preparing the texts and the answers to the letters that we send, and they produce the documents there. In the past, everyone would wait for April to come, and everything would happen in April. But now, throughout the whole year, even in the middle of July, they pass bills, and it is like that victory or that euphoria of victory that they are in. So they do not wait for April nowadays. The doors are open now, and anytime, anything can happen. We should expect this. Thank you very much.
The next question for Dr. Christian Johannes Henry. How do you assess the work carried out by Turkey against the so-called Armenian genocide claims or allegations?
Pardon, I didn't get it. The question again, please.
How do you assess the work carried out by Turkey against the so-called Armenian genocide allegations?
Okay, how many days do I have? The problem in this case is...
2 minutes only, please.
Okay, then I shorten the blah blah. So the point is, I think Turkey could do much more effort to take out the results about this.
But we can,
Do you hear me? Yeah. Okay. What I mentioned before is it's everyone. I always feel the thankfulness from Turkish people, academics, universities about research. But if you ask them about foundation, let's say money, it is the end. Then it's already finished. So everyone says, "Nice work, do it. We help you, we support you. If you need something, zero." not possible. So the outcast could be much better if the little Armenia and the diaspora pays much more money in that field than the big Turkey with his allies. So that is the first problem, and it doesn't matter which government. It doesn't make difference if it's the nowadays government or the old ones. Even Atatürk ignored the topic and said we didn't do a genocide, so we will not talk about it, but the rest of the world talked about it. So I think that is the most problem that no one is paying, so the outcasts could be better if they would do, and that is the big wish. Otherwise, the war is lost before it started.
Thank you very much. And the last question for Dr. Patrick Walsh. Do you think the Karabakh War can be a turning point in the relations in the region?
Well, hopefully, I think I said this, the positive scenario is that it could be. Maybe, I hope Armenia has learned its lesson. That's probably false optimism, but maybe it's only through Armenia becoming part of the economic infrastructure of the South Caucasus and the wider region, that it will actually see benefits. It will actually, be able to feed its own people, that its own people will be able to stay in their own homes and have jobs. And maybe this will produce a different population that sees that, the quest for territorial expansionism is a mistaken path. And instead, they can actually look after their own population and look after their people. Perhaps that is a dream, but I can't see any other way out of it, to be honest. Unless they get a reality and they understand that, looking after their own people and forgetting about, expanding their territory. Unless they do that and they see the selfish benefits in such a project, and it does take root. And hopefully a lot of it is to do with Russia's role in this, and obviously Turkey as well. But hopefully Russia is honest and does actually facilitate this peace process and the infrastructure development, and there's a good working relationship between Turkey and Russia that is preserved. I mean, if that's the case, then maybe Armenia can be almost guided into the right direction, and in everybody's interest in the stability of all the neighbors in the South Caucasus. That's the most hopeful thing. But it's probably hope against history, as I said before.
Thank you, Dr. Walsh. We are all crossing our fingers for the positive scenario. Evet, böylece bugünkü 3. oturumumuzun ve aynı zamanda konferansımızın sonuna geldik.
End of today's third session and the conference. Very distinguished participants and speakers were among us today, and at least for me, was a very teaching, informative conference that opened up new horizons. And I hope that I really would like to thank the Republic of Turkey President, Director of Communication, for such timely organization of this very nice event. Thank you very much. Good evening. We would like to thank the chairman of the session and the speakers for their presentations. As Mr. Ambassador mentioned, this session really opened up new horizons for us. It was very stimulating, which helped us look from different perspectives. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the International Conference of the Events of 1915, organized by the Republic of Turkey President's Director of Communication. In this conference, we had 3 sessions. In all the sessions, very important messages have been given to the world and very important points have been raised, which should be given thought by the whole world. And I believe this conference will be leading the way future as well. And I would like to thank our participants, guests who made contributions to this conference. Hope to meet again in healthy days, and I would like to wish all of you a good evening and Ramadan Mubarak.